çektim gözüme, düştüm çölün düzüne, dost gezirem özüme. Dost gel hardasan, tez gel hardasan, tıp 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 tıp. Dost gel hardasan, tez gel hardasan, tıp 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 tıp.
Hello everyone. Welcome to the new episode of Tix Tix Xanimlar's podcast. We are here with Nika Jabiyeva. Jabiyeva, yes, sorry for that. And we're going to speak about identity again and what is Azerbaijani identity with another person who was also in diaspora and then moved back to Azerbaijan. Nika, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Nika Jabiyeva. I'm in my mid-30s. I was born in Baku. I'd spent, but up until the age of 11 or 12 I lived in Baku. I was raised in Baku, and then my parents moved to Canada, so in the late 90s. And I could say that I grew up there. And then over time, life just sort of worked itself out in a way that I moved back. So kind of not, not completely leaving Canada behind. I kind of share my time between the two countries now. But yeah, I got to experience Azerbaijan as a whole new Azerbaijan, compared to what I knew in the 90s.
What will you say was the biggest difference? Do you remember your childhood in Azerbaijan and do you remember moving to Canada?
Yeah, of course I remember. I'd say at the time there was this great sense of doom. And although we were children, I had a happy childhood, and I can't say, we lived in the city. We weren't directly affected by the war, although every Azerbaijani was affected by the war in Karabakh, but not directly in a sense that we were not, one of those 700,000 IDPs that were ethnically cleansed from Karabakh. So certainly not in that sense. But I remember that refugee crisis crippling the country. We lived next to the train station in the city center, and I like remember the influx of refugees. I remember going to school and seeing, I was young. I was a child, so I didn't really understand what was happening, but I knew from like this overall anxiety of my parents. They're constantly trying to, make difficult decisions and these things, that there was this sense of like doom over the country. And I don't think it's necessarily just has to do with Azerbaijan. Of course, there was a war, but I think it was a post-Soviet thing across the entire post-Soviet region. The fact that, this entire ideology, the Soviet ideology had just fallen apart. The entire country had fallen apart. I mean, the Soviet Union. So it was an end to many things for a lot of people who believed in that system. So I remember that type of that sense of that there's something wrong here, and we have to go. I didn't know what it was at the time. And I remember, and compared to those compared to those years, me as an adult in Azerbaijan, it's an entirely different feeling about the country, about where we're going. When I returned, it felt like a start of something new. There was this dynamism, and there was this sense of growth, this sense of unity that I've never experienced in Azerbaijan before. Also because I didn't grow up here, but also because I felt like I returned to a whole new country. So it was a very interesting experience.
I was always wondering what it's like to grow up, what it was like for people to grow up during the first Karabakh War, because my mom was at that time already in university, which it was a hard time for her as well, but she remembers it more vividly. And you know how in uni years you are more susceptible to things happening around you and they're affecting you more. I was wondering if it's the same for a child, but it is somehow good that you don't remember a lot of it, because otherwise it would have been like a very tragic memories.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember like this physical darkness, like actual. That was my very first memory of Canada when we arrived, and we were my cousins that already lived there from the early '90s, so they picked us up from the airport, and we were driving on a highway, and I just like looked at Toronto, and it was just full of lights, and I remember the '90s in Baku, but this was the case for the entire Soviet Union as well. There was no electricity in most places. They tried to save electricity, so like the streets were dark. My mom would like clutch my hand trying to like pick me up from ballet school or like art school art classes that I took. And if it was remotely dark outside, she'd be like holding my hand really. She'd just like clutch to me and just walk really fast because she was scared. Like the streets were dark. And I remember that huge contrast of arriving to Canada and seeing this like place full of light. And my brother actually, he's 2 years younger than I am, but he really remembers that moment as well. Like, remember when we arrived and everything was suddenly light and bright? So that was interesting. Yeah.
Yega, you moved to UK just recently, and then you moved back for university. Did you have any similar experiences? Did you see a change maybe in 3 or 4 years in Azerbaijan after you moved to the UK?
To be honest, yes, definitely. I felt like there was a massive change, even though that I came back for every summer while I was in the UK. I started noticing it gradually, and then after my university, as you know, I went to the US for a year. And then after I came back from the US, it was drastically different. Maybe it was also because, let's say, my experience in the US wasn't the best. And I was really looking forward to something that where I would feel warm or where I would feel at home. So when I came back, I was very, very happy, which I did not expect from myself, to be completely honest. But a lot of things that would be like an issue before, they kind of either progressed or they went away completely. My issue was always that people were kind of always kept to themselves. Nobody was really expressing themselves or something like that, if you get what I'm saying, especially in the younger generation. Everybody was like calm, collected. Nobody was really, I don't know, making great memories outside of a home or of a certain setting. But then just the social life, it boomed. It was a massive surprise for me. Maybe I just didn't see it before. That could also be a possibility, but I only started noticing it after I came back. So that was a massive improvement for me.
I see. So even though you left Azerbaijan for a couple of years, there was still some kind of a difference.
There was a difference, not only, yeah, there was definitely a difference in people, like social difference. I saw since it's the age of the internet, etc., there is more information flowing in and out. There is more ways for people to see what the outside is like. Basically, it's not like the 90s or during the USSR times. We are I don't know, we're getting more open with each other, and I feel like in terms of progress, what came to us was for me as a girl, I started feeling more free here. Before that, it would be very kind of yeah, it would be conservative, not only from people around you, but for some people from their families as well. My family was, thankfully, they were absolutely chill with everything, but they were really scared for the outside, basically. But after I went away to live alone for 3 years and I came back, they were finally very calm whenever I would leave the house, like because I already lived alone. But apart from that, I noticed that for everyone else, it also changed for my friends and acquaintances. So that is a positive thing.
I can tell you it even changed from the 5 years ago when I first came here.
Yeah.
Massively, massively changed. I definitely feel that like freedom within the younger generation. I mean, even things like just young couples walking around holding hands or like
Yes,
hugging each
yes.
other, sitting in cafes. Like these things were unheard of. Like when I was, younger. The very first time I came back, I was I think 19 or 20. and I was a completely Canadian kid by then, you know, and I came here, and suddenly my family, and obviously I was unmarried, so my family was like, Shh, you can't do this and don't do that, and just, you know, try not to go there. And not my immediate family, because my parents are also very liberal, but my aunts and uncles and cousins were looking out for me, you know, not to go somewhere I shouldn't go. And I'm like, oh God, this is stifling. Like,
Yeah.
and and yeah, and like, and I just, it's night and day. Of course, it, you know, depends on people's families and where they come from. Certain regions are more conservative than others, but just from what I notice in Baku, the younger generation is just very free, if looked at in general. And I really like it. I really like seeing that.
Yeah, there's definitely more hope than there was like 5 years ago. Even like comparing this to 10 years ago, this is massive, massive difference. It's like I would say
Totally.
niebo и земля, yeah. But even with 5 years, the difference is just drastic. I did not expect this when when I was going just for studying, but again, there is still hope for us, basically.
I actually experienced something similar to it. I wouldn't like, for me, Azerbaijan was a place where I would go for summer, spend some time with family, and then come back. But each time I went, especially after the time I got my tattoo, everyone was so worried that someone is going to see my tattoo, like a relative in the family, but not the people who are close to me, but like, for example, my dad's cousin or someone like that. Or I remember when I was walking in Targovo with my friend 2 years ago, and my tattoo, like they saw my tattoo, and then they were like, "Ah, bunun tatusuna bah," which means look at her tattoo. Which
I had the same experience when I came here at 19. I had a tattoo. Well, still have it, obviously, but I remember like we were at someone's dacha, like some distant relatives, and I wore short shorts, and my older cousin, obviously, she's like, can you like change the shorts? And I got really mad because I was a very rebellious kid growing up, and I was like, why should I be changing anything? But you know, now you understand. Like I understand in retrospect. Of course, there are customs, there are norms, there are certain things that people try to abide by, and that's okay too. Like I've grown to appreciate a lot of these things as well. But at the time, it seemed to me outrageous that someone was telling me like to change.
I don't think they have the right to do that. Like, like, with no offense to your family, but even with my family, like, I would feel always so weird out that I had to cover my tattoo, or I shouldn't wear too short when I have relatives coming, or it's just all so weird.
I don't think anyone has the right to do that. Absolutely, I don't think anyone has the right to do that. It's just I've grown to understand why, I guess, and be less judgmental about it. Versus before, I would react pretty harshly. You know, I was, I refused to change, and I was just, you know, going against the system, and against the norms, and this is how I live. But there's also like юношеский maximalism, you know, like when you're much younger, you think you're alone are going to change the entire you know, set of customs in the entire Azerbaijan. And these things usually take time, and sometimes, I guess something I learned with age is that soft change sometimes can be a bit more powerful in the long term.
Okay.
I wanted to add about the dressing thing. So it was the same for me. Like before that, if I heard any comment towards my dressing or like the things that I wear, it would be just an instant explosion from my side. Because I was a teenager, and again, I also was rebellious, just like you, Nika. But now I kind of understand if I see if I meet up with my distant family, who is more into customs and stuff. But otherwise, again, in the city, I can choose whatever I want.
Yeah, I'm like the same, but it's still like you having to change your clothes because someone doesn't like it. It's just
Yeah,
a bit.
it's just annoying, but you find your ways around it, basically.
You know, it's not even that someone
You
doesn't like
learn when to do it and when not, stuff like that.
it's not even, sorry, I'm interrupting. It's not even that someone doesn't like it. It's just that when you're, you know, for example, sometimes even at during those years, I don't know, I don't face that anymore, obviously, but I'm also grown and have a family of my own. And I'd say that the environment around us has changed, and people are, again, are a lot more relaxed and more liberal, for sure. But at the time, it was more like people being concerned of what others thought. So there was all these like other conservative relatives and friends. And when you're young and you're unmarried, uh, they don't want anyone like to think anything bad, that you know what I mean, like, there were it's almost that these little elements like tattoos or shorts or whatever, they used to be these elements that were associated with like bad behavior, or um that type of like, the girl has too much freedom and does whatever she wants. So I feel like people try to constrain that, just for obviously for social reasons. And this is true of many, honestly, many countries, many societies, in the Caucasus especially. It's a it's a how do you say, it's something you face in more conservative cultures, for sure.
I agree. I grew up in Turkey. I grew up in Istanbul, just to be exact, because Turkey's, we can say, mentalitat differs from city to city, or even from the area of Istanbul you live. I grew up in a very modern, very liberal area, and Turkey is a neighboring country to Azerbaijan. And the mass difference, like in the mentalitat that you get, is just something else. Because in Turkey, everyone has tattoos. If they Everyone dress ups the way they want. At least that's how it was while I lived there. I don't know how it is now, but it's just such a big difference between Turkey and Azerbaijan in that terms. And I remember whenever Turkish people would visit Azerbaijan, and they would smoke outside the woman, or they would wear a shirt, they would also get weird stares. And then like if we and then like they would speak about it, because we had my cousin's wedding a couple of years ago, and then some people from Turkey also were invited, so they just came, they stayed with us. And I remember we were going outside, and this one woman, she didn't care what anyone thought, so she would just smoke outside without caring. And I remember all the weird stares she would get from the man, because
I
smoke.
would say I would say this bit is actually getting better right now. Again, just by seeing what's going on in the city and stuff. But it's very interesting, Maka, that you said this about Turkey. You were living in Istanbul, right?
Yeah.
I feel like Istanbul is like the most progressive part of Turkey, but I have friends from Ankara, and I don't know what is going on with the recent policies that they have on alcohol, etc. But what my friends basically said, we had this discussion like a month ago, maybe. They said that they stopped allowing to serve alcohol past a certain time. Then you can't buy alcohol even in markets past a certain time. It seems like the government is introducing more policies, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's just what I've heard from my friends. They said that it seems like they're trying to make the society more conservative when it clearly isn't, but they're really trying. And what they were appreciating in Baku is the fact that people are actually more free, compared to what is going on in Ankara, for example, right now.
um so the podcast is not really about Turkey, but I'm just going to explain it in like bits what's happening in there as well. The way Turkish people think and the way the Turkish government acts, like there's no correlation between them.
Yeah.
This religious minority in Turkey that just speaks for everyone else. And the government is currently doing a policy towards like Islam, so they've take the religion first. And even
Okay.
with the politics that they have, for example, with countries and everything, Erdogan really sees himself as what can I
I
say?
also, if I may interrupt, I also heard that, and I think he was trying to do that, like ban alcohol under COVID
Yeah.
Yeah,
restrictions,
yeah.
using that as an excuse. I don't think it's permanent, but I've seen some like criticisms online of that from like actually just Turkish people. Seen a lot of criticism on Twitter.
He did
Yeah,
that
the
during
reason
Ramadan. During Ramadan, that's the issue. You cannot
oh,
drink in Ramadan, so he did it during Ramadan. So obviously, it was not really in relation to COVID. That's why everyone got so angry.
yeah.
Ah,
So
okay.
The reason why I brought it up is just because like I was surprised for the first time ever to hear from a Turkish person that I feel like people are more free here than in Ankara at the moment, just because of the time when we went out. Like, you know how everyone now is drinking on the streets. There is one street like near Bardak, Room, everything is on one street. So there's tons of people out there. Everyone's drinking and smoking, and the guy was like really surprised. He's like, I haven't seen this for a long time.
But if I'm just going to add one last thing about Turkey, but just in general in relation to us, uh, you know, like although we have ethnic ties, linguistic ties, you know, Turkey's always been well, even like since the days of the Ottoman Empire, right, when they controlled half of Europe, they've I always found them to be like more like the Greeks, like a little bit closer to like European culture in a lot of the places. Yes, influenced by Islam as well. And whereas we're more, you know, guided by the rules of the Caucasus, and they're shared amongst like the Caucasus countries, which have always been a lot more stringent. So even regardless of our religions, there are these similar mentalities also in Georgia, in Armenia, in Azerbaijan, because of the region we come from. So it's not. We always like try to. We always compare ourselves with Turkey because we're so similar, you know, ethnically, but culturally, we're quite different, I'd say.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I agree. I definitely agree with that. Ankara is also quite secular, so I don't know what that person was speaking about, but but in Turkey wise, it's true that they change from city to city, but I think still, even though whatever the government is doing, Istanbul is more progressive than Baku.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Istanbul.
Yeah, yeah. So let's get back to Azerbaijan.
Yeah. Okay. Nika, what do you think was the first thing you noticed in the society, the difference, or were you too young to understand that between Azerbaijan and Canada?
You mean the Canadian society, right? When I
Yeah.
moved over there. You know, I feel like I almost expected there were, because we didn't just up and go. We actually like applied for immigration and waited for our documents for several years. So there was this sense of how do you say, like there was this like an expectation of the fact that we're moving and for a long time, and it's almost like we've mentally prepped ourselves to move and to become a part of a different society very soon. So when we arrived, we were actually very excited, and you know, all of those differences to me, they just seemed like really exciting parts of a new country. And at the time, you know, you don't think, because I also come from like the Russian speaking part of Azerbaijani society, right? And like, you know, admittedly, like we're products of like Russification policies, right? Like getting Russian speaking education and like learning about Russian culture. And while I appreciate all of that very much, there was, at the time, I was very much of a Soviet child when I moved to Canada. So, uh, you know, there was this sense of like, okay, well, the Soviet Union is over. We now shed our past and become part of the Canadian society. So that was like the first feeling, maybe not a conscious feeling as a, you know, as a 12-year-old for sure, but there was the sense of like, you know, need to learn English and need to like, you know, make friends and do good in school and things like that. And only over time, when I started reading more and learning more and trying to like unpack my own culture, my own ethnic roots, and who I am, who, you know, my family was, you know, who as what our, as like specifically Azerbaijani history was, you know, versus the Soviet history that was constantly preached to us in school. You know, that added a whole new layer of exploration into my life, like where I actually wanted to dive into that more. You know, I no longer wanted to, you know, be part of Canadian society. Be that said, I already was part of the Canadian society because I grew up there, but it made me want to really explore who we are as people, aside from our Soviet past, just like who we are as Azerbaijanis. And that became very important to me over time. In that even when I returned here, I already felt like I returned not only to a different country from what it was in the 90s, but I returned as a very different person. So yeah.
Yeah, God. Well, obviously, I think for me and yeah, God, the society differences were a bit more I think we noticed it a bit more differently because we grew up in the age when there was technology, like when there was internet, social media, and then you already know, or like from movies maybe, how the life in the West is. Because even someone who never went to the UK or never went to, let's say, Canada at a young age, let's say 16, they will watch, I don't know, Friends, How I Met Your Mother, something like that, and they will see, or maybe like Sex Education, and they will see how the life is there and how the norms apply there, and then
Yeah,
how,
like you have an expectation
yeah.
of
uh,
what it's like.
yeah, Yega, was there anything you noticed when you moved to the UK for the first time? Like what was different?
Well, yeah, there were a lot of things, but like one of the most prominent ones for me were probably family relations. Um, it depended on, I had three roommates, flatmates even, who were all British, and it depended like which region of the UK somebody came from for them to have like specific family relations. For example, I had one of my flatmates, she was from Yorkshire, and they were kind of similar to us in terms of their family was very close. Their extended family was very close, etc. But she was one of those exceptions, basically. For us here, almost everybody is very close with their cousins, at least, you know. Uh, I am personally very close to my cousins, like, I don't know, once removed, twice removed. I have a massive family and I know a lot of them, or at least I try to. What I noticed there is that people are not that close to their extended family. Some people are not that close to their immediate family. For example, I would be like 24/7 with my parents on the phone, just sharing stuff and at least talking once a day for them to see me and to hear me. My flatmates were talking once a week. I knew one guy who was talking once a month. I knew some people who were talking every other month, and it was like very weird for me, but it's absolutely normal there. Like, and it was that was one of the culture shocks, I would say, for me.
Oh,
Then,
oh, sorry. No, no, after you, after you.
oh no, I'm gonna be
Okay.
talking like for quite a while about another
Go,
topic.
go,
What did
go.
you want to say?
No, I just remembered one thing. I remembered the whole New Year's thing. That was so shocking to me because New Year's is a family holiday, right? Like to us,
Yes.
you spend it at home. And all my friends, when I became a little older, all my friends in high school constantly expected me to be free for New Year's. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
I'm not. I'm having dinner with my family. They're like, you're having dinner for New Year's? And that was pretty, I could not explain that to anybody for a long time.
Yeah, I had to explain New Year's as well. They were surprised that we're basically doing almost the same thing they're doing for Christmas, but for New Year's. And again, everybody expects you to be free for New Year's, and I would always be with my family. Even I only spent one New Year's Eve in the UK, and then my mum flew in to visit me. So it always had to be with the family. I probably would say that compared to British people, there is a lot of like cultural differences that I experienced. One of them being a family thing, another one being, again, the freedom thing for uh, the youth, let's say, because a lot of my peers that I met in university already experienced way more before going into university than I did. Would that be clubbing life or basically the social life? I personally didn't have it in Baku. So for me, it was everything completely new. For them, it was something that they started doing not really legally before they were 18, and then they just continued.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I just thought about because I was thinking immediately like what the culture shock was immediately, and I couldn't think of anything because again I was young. I was just went to junior high school, made friends, and everything was cool. But I remember the culture shock growing up when I was already a Canadian. Like I'd gone to university, I had a job, and everything. All my friends were local and from over there, and one of these things like that I experienced as an adult is when I'd start to recount certain things from my childhood and talk to people that had grown up in Canada, I started actually realizing how not very normal our childhood was. in a sense that, you know, they grew up and they went to elementary school, and then they went to cottages and took trips and just had very normal lives. And here I am with my memories of, like, you know, tanks arriving on January 20th, you know, the Soviet on Black January, my parents trying to hide, refugees. And it's not like they were a big part of a childhood, in a sense that, like, you don't notice that as a child. You don't notice it. It's not a sort of trauma that is that you're conscious of growing up. But as an adult, you think back and you realize, like, that was a huge part of your life, this overall fear that surrounded everybody in the country. And so I remember, like, my Canadian friends would kind of look at me like, wow, you know, you guys come from a very complicated place. And I felt like there were a lot of people that couldn't you know, they understood me logically, but they couldn't commiserate, in a sense of, like, they couldn't understand me on that level. And only sometimes people from our region that have been through it. I also, like, had a few Georgian friends who've been through the, you know, Abkhazia war. And my best friend, she's Serbo-Croatian. She's been through the war in Bosnia. So, you know, I realized that my closer friends were people with very similar childhoods to mine, and we could kind of all understand each other on some sort of a deeper level, of what our childhoods have been like, versus I just feel like people that grew up in Canada in very normal, proper societies, to put it in such generic terms, rarely understood that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with the Second Karabakh War, I was I was in the UK the whole time when it was going on, and I couldn't find anyone else except Azerbaijanis to speak about it. Anyone else. And sometimes, like, my other Jewish friends would DM me because they would get it, because they had the whole Israeli Arab war, and then there's also a trauma in there. And, like, the people, even like the people from the UK, for example, they will say, why don't you just give them the land? What's so important about it?
Yeah.
Why don't you just give it to them? And I would be like, are you kidding me? What do you mean, what's so important about it? What about the refugees? And they will be like, oh, the refugees will go and live there as well, and they will make their own country. And I would be like, why don't you give Scotland independence then, huh? And then, like, the argument will go on. But yeah, there's definitely, I totally agree with you, Nika. There's also the intergenerational trauma that I think that we are going to see in Azerbaijanis from the first war, and from Armenians as well, that will just pass on, because I still carry the trauma from my great grandma, and I know that many people who survived genocides, ethnic massacres, and just wars, that they just have it. Like, in some Arabs have it because of the some Persians have it as well because of the Iraqi-Iran war, and that trauma just passes on to you. The differences in the society, in the Azerbaijani society, that were made after the second Karabakh war. Did you guys notice any differences in Baku, at least?
Who would like
Nika,
to
you wanna
start?
talk?
Yeah, sure. So, I can start, like, with the day that the war was over. Uh, Basically, it was the happiest day of everyone's lives, probably, in the city that I saw. Everyone was out on the streets celebrating, and people were just there were people that were randomly giving out candies. There were people that were randomly giving out flowers. Everyone was, like, helping each other to the max. But the thing is, even during the war, people started noticing, like, a sense of unity finally, because a lot of people forgot about their differences, um you know, like little skirmishes or something. A lot of people came together. Even there was a difference, like, for one of the people I know, a girl was trying to adopt a dog from an abusive household, let's say, and the owner of the dog wouldn't give her the dog, even though that she was ready to pay him for it, etc. She decided to go to the police, and as you know, we don't really have a lot of authority in animal abuse, and the police usually doesn't do anything about it. During the war, the police for some reason they decided to be really serious about it, and they actually helped her to get the dog out of the abusive household, and they did I think fine the abusive owner. So basically people were actually really eager to help each other and do something for better. After the war, I would say the unity is kind of still there. I don't know how to describe it. People are way kinder to each other. But the another thing that my mom always points out is that people were kind of having this feeling of not shame, but like constant depression after the first war because you lost something so massive. And then after the second war, we finally regained our confidence as a nation. Like,
Absolutely. There was this huge sense of like my parents didn't even talk about the first war. They didn't tell me anything. There's constantly this propaganda against us saying, your parents sit there brainwashing you. Like my parents told me nothing. It was just a sense of loss and that they didn't want to talk about it. And I remember actually going to, I was one, but my parents took me to Shusha in the late 80s, just before it got occupied. And we had pictures from there. And I remember kind of like being a teenager, is looking through our family pictures. I'm like, oh, where's this picture taken? Like, oh, well, when we go back to Azerbaijan, like, we should go here, we should go there, we should go here. And both my parents just like didn't say anything. They're like, yeah, we can't go back there, and this was, now I realize how sad that was. Yeah, just massively sad. So yeah, there was a huge sense of loss in the entire society. And after the second war, I mean, even the unity that Yega's talking about, absolutely. I felt it everywhere. Like I worked with the diaspora, like everywhere, the entire Azerbaijanis all over the world were just calling each other, like, what do you need? What do you need help with? There were so many different stories that like I won't get into, but just really beautiful, positive stories that I've heard from like different cities, countries where people were getting together, helping each other. But especially here too, like I'm noticing a newfound confidence. Like it's, like obviously that like intense wartime unity is obviously, has calmed down, but the unity itself, but this confidence and this need to help each other is so there. I see it on the streets. I see it in people just like approaching, like trying to help you, like just if someone looks or is looking around and looks lost. The other day I saw these two guys. They're like, oh, you're not from around here, do you need any help? Like this is just so outgoing for Azerbaijanis. And if someone, I think there's a case like I read about today. These two guys, they stole books from a bookstore and they got caught, obviously, right? Like they committed a crime, but there's all these people online saying like, hey, can we like donate books to them? Like, let's raise money, let's help them out. Which is very sweet. And I'm seeing that everywhere quite often.
I saw the one with the books as well. They stole Ali and Nino, right?
I think so. Yeah. I think so. At the store named Ali and Nino.
The store named Ali and Nino. Okay.
Yeah, it's a bookstore. So I don't know why I haven't looked into the story. I just saw some tweets on Twitter, people just getting together saying like, hey, how can we help them out? Maybe they want to read and they didn't have money for books. Let's get them books, which was really lovely.
Yeah. One of my like favorite things about Azerbaijan, whenever I would visit it, you would walk in this, like I would just walk in the street and then you will see all, old grandpas playing chess, and then people just reading in the streets, or just like a little boy with his book selling books. And the books would always be old and they will be like from the Soviet times, and then there will be that, the old book smell in the air as well. Like it will all mix. Do you know what I'm saying?
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One of my
that in the UK, I never see that connection or that like people being together or having the vibe in Scotland at least.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add that I didn't see that in Manchester either. Like I didn't see anything like this.
It's a difference between like individualistic cultures and community-centric cultures. There's like the downside to it is that everyone is in your business. And I remember like talking about this with my mom, because at first when we came here, you know, everyone wants to know what you're doing, what are your plans, when are you getting married, da, da, da. And I found that so annoying, you know, when I was younger. And with age, I actually started to appreciate it so much. That, you know, if I find myself in some area where I know I don't know the area. I was recently looking for a friend's house, and I'm, you know, I'm looking around and this old man is like, ne lazımdı? Kim lazımdı? Like, you know, like, who do you need? You know, like, it just, he's being helpful, but just like, I'm like, well, I'm looking for this person's house. It's like, okay, you go here, you go there. But it's like, you know, you walk into a neighborhood, everyone's looking at you. Who did you come to see? In the West, people leave you alone because it's kind of inappropriate. Like, why would you ask a stranger, you know, where they're going? So I get why the societies are like that, but I definitely had missed that about Azerbaijan, because that's not the case in Canada. Like, everyone just kind of leaves each other alone. And here I really, really appreciate that people, again, the downside, maybe people being in your business too much when you're younger is really annoying, but when you're older, you really, really appreciate that.
There's like pros and cons to every kind of society, like individualistic and the it takes a village to raise a child kind of mentality. But I always appreciated in the UK that nobody cared about me, like nobody cared about what I do, where I go, nobody looks, etc. But at some point, for example, when I needed help for something and I didn't know anyone there, it was like, nobody cares about me, this is actually shit, I don't appreciate this anymore. And there was no one.
It can feel very lonely. Yeah, I totally hear that.
Nika, what would you say that you know, would you want to go back to Canada? I know this is going to be a bit of a personal question, but like, do you see a future more in Canada or in Azerbaijan?
Quite honestly, I am going back to Canada because my work is from there. So I'm gonna go back in the summer, and I had been going back. It's like my mom is there, my brother is there, like my friends are there. I had been going back every year before. I was essentially sharing my time between the two countries before the pandemic. So yeah, I will be going back, but as far as permanently, I don't know. I can't even answer that question. I've been trying to answer that question to my family that does not understand this lifestyle. They still, you know, their idea of living between several countries is crazy. Although I would say that most of our friends live this way. Someone's got family in one place, work in another place, their kids are in school in a third place or something, you know, depending on the age of the family. But it's quite normal to me not to know. I have no idea. I genuinely do not know. My husband also works like partially between Baku and also Ukraine, so we're all over the place.
I see. Yega, what about you? Would you want to have your future in Azerbaijan, or would you want to go back to the UK, back to Manchester?
I would say my answer is similar. The thing is with me, I have no idea what I want, because I would personally, what I would want is maybe in the future at some point to work somewhere abroad, most likely in the UK. But I know that in the end, I will most likely come back to Azerbaijan anyway. But I don't even know if I will have an opportunity or will ever decide to go to work abroad. It depends on a lot of things. Like, I have my entire family here, even though I have a lot of friends there as well. I kind of want to experience new things, but at the same time, I'm afraid to leave. It's the fear of the unknown, basically, because I spent my university years in the UK. I don't know what like real life outside of uni is like, so that's a bit scary. But I don't know what the future holds. I'm open to almost everything, so I'll see. But I can't say that I'm against working in the UK, or that I'm like definitely leaving Azerbaijan or definitely staying. I genuinely have no idea.
I don't think anybody does in our day and age. I swear.
Yeah,
I
for
think the whole
sure.
concept of like permanently living in one place is so outdated. Like, it's
Agreed.
yeah, it's a generational thing for like the older generation too. Like, they're like, well, when are you gonna like, where are you gonna settle?
What if I
Listen,
don't want to settle?
yeah, I mean, I have kids and I still haven't settled, so I have no idea.
To be honest, this gave me some positive thinking into the future. Like this gave me hope. So thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I have my own opinion on that as well. I don't think I will be ever going back to Turkey because I just don't feel like I don't feel like I belong there, because moving to the UK and then being Azerbaijani, having another side of me, I just don't feel the connection in there. Like, I know Istanbul is very secular and all, but UK is also secular, and I feel more like, at least for me, that the UK is more suitable. And for Azerbaijan, since I never lived there, I would like to live there maybe for a year or two just to see how it is. But long term, I don't think I will settle anywhere as well.
If you decide to live here for a year or two, please don't come before the pandemic ends, because like half of the things that you can do in Baku right now are closed off just because of the pandemic.
Yeah, I don't think I will be coming anytime soon. Maybe like in 10 years.
Okay, I want you
But
to experience all of it. That's what I'm saying.
maybe
10 years, it's gonna be a whole new country again.
Yeah.
hopefully. Nika, thank you so much for coming to our podcast, by the way. We really appreciate it. It was so fun having you.
Of course, of
Yes,
course.
thank you, Nika. It was really, really fun.
It was a pleasure talking to you girls.